concrete as such is a low carbon emitting product, but it is directly after water the most used material by human being. And with CSC certification, with the CO2 module, we aim at contributing to the overall reduction. Is not like many other labels or like some other labels, just kind of a self-declaration. No, you really undergo a robust process which has to be repeated every 3 years.
Welcome back to the Decarb Connect podcast. I am very pleased to be joined this week by two of the leading lights of the Concrete Sustainability Council, Michael Scharpf, who is Head of Sustainable Construction for Holcim, and Christian Artelt, who is Senior Manager of Sustainable Construction and Public Affairs at Heidelberg Materials, both of whom leading the charge on the labelling initiatives that the CSC is driving forward. So welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Alex, and it's a pleasure being here. It's a step of a journey which started some 15 years back. That was when I was working just as an architect and project manager in the real estate sector. And by that time in Germany, where I was working, the local sustainability council, Green Building Council, has been founded. And that was the moment where I raised the hand for my by then company and said, I think we should join that. And I think there's something in the definition and also making really a business model out of what makes up for a sustainable building. And then later on, I joined Holcim as a major cement and concrete manufacturer. And there also the sustainability of materials was a big topic. And that was then what brought me also to the Concrete Sustainability Council, to the CSC, because what we were missing was what is a sustainable concrete? So what's the materiality of producing concrete and cement and aggregates? So all the supply chain materials behind the very product, and that was missing. And so we said we have to set this up. We have to define good practice, best practice, also a bit a level of ambition for making concrete, and that's what brought me here.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And Christian, I know when I was checking out your background, you come more from the R&D side, but give us a bit of a feel again for professionally, personally, how have you come into sustainability?
Yeah, as you said, basically I started with the cement and concrete sector some 13 years ago and was working for research and development roughly for 10 years before I stepped into sustainability, which I really appreciated going forward to work in this sector to contribute to the reduction of our carbon footprint, to enhance the circularity aspects. And from a company's perspective, what we saw is that a holistic view on sustainability in the building material production started to increasingly be important for our stakeholders. And as a leading company in the construction material sector, we saw obviously our social responsibility and our environmental responsibility to bring the sector forward to an even more sustainable journey. And I took the opportunity to personally engage into that journey through contributing to the Concrete Sustainability Council.
So we'll hear a little bit more about the Concrete Sustainability Council now, actually. That's just sort of set the scene. I know both of you have given a little bit of background to it. Michael, just tell us a little, like for those who are not in sector and may have no frame of reference for it, what separates or distinguishes the Concrete Sustainability Council from other concrete cement associations and groups? What is the kind of specific story about the CSC?
Well, I wouldn't say there is really a separation. It's just it's going hand in hand. So the different associations in cement and concrete sector are taking care of all the aspects which come along with producing, marketing, and placing this material. Whereas the Concrete Sustainability Council really focuses on the sustainability of the product and how to describe this, how to benchmark this. And so I would say this is going hand in hand. I think maybe it's also important to understand how we are defining this. I would like to go a bit in depth on this also, and at a later point. But the CSC again is taking the lead in defining, benchmarking, producing quantifiable criteria on what makes up for sustainable concrete. And in that, I see it really complementary to what other players in the field of associations are doing.
So it's really, I think the thing that I didn't initially understand, actually, even when we were first introduced, was that it's specifically about ensuring that there are sort of the like-for-like terminology that goes into contracts to ensure that when I, the buyer, am saying I am buying this amount of sustainable concrete or engaging with a provider around that sustainability has a standard kind of a set of recognizable factors behind it. Is that a kind of a good layman's overview, or have I dumbed it down too far?
Yeah, exactly. So it's going beyond the classical definition of a concrete, which is a pure technical definition, so which are performance criteria, which put on top also a well-designed or well-blended set of sustainability criteria, defining which are then aggregated in the CSC certificate. So you don't have to ask anything about biodiversity or anything about carbon reporting or anything about land use. It is aggregated in one holistic label, and that is the CSC label, and that you can put on top in your specifications to make sure that certain standards, minimum standards plus good practice plus best practice, are being applied in the production of this.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank our production partner and sponsor, Jano Media, for their support in delivering the Decarb Connect podcast. Over the last few years, they've helped us to facilitate great conversations that connect us with our audience, and their skills and expertise mean that we get to concentrate exclusively on generating the content, the conversations that engage, inform, and inspire. So, Christian, I'm going to come back to you because on our prep call, and in fact, in that intro, you were sort of talking about the need for this holistic and responsible sourcing of concrete. That word holistic is kind of an interesting one here. So what's been CSC's journey to this point, and then what next? So we've agreed, we understand what the kind of the role and goal and the stamp, as it were, that CSC provides, but what's been the journey to this point, and then what next?
Yeah, since the first launch of CSC certification in 2017, the journey has been along rolling out CSC certification globally, quite successful in Europe, and recently also in Latin America, and we are also present in Northern America. Beyond this, we have also intensively worked on expanding CSC certification beyond the traditional plant certification. We have gone into product certification in 2 dimensions. The first very important one is into low carbon products, and secondly into products with recycled aggregates in particular. So the whole system, and that is, we are really proud of that, has been taken up in the meantime by 750 concrete plants, cement and aggregate production sites throughout 20 countries and regions. Yeah, and current, let's say, activities are in developing an update on CSC certification to be released the next years. I would say important areas are the field of human rights. So we are reworking the human rights prerequisite, which is needs to be fulfilled in order to have access to CSC certification. And we are also working on energy and climate criteria, quite obviously, in order to support the carbon neutrality journey of the cement and concrete sector.
And Alex, if I might add, and you asked about the journey that the CSC has been gone through. Another aspect of this journey is also our dialogue or our interaction with green building labels. If you want to say so, green building labels are nothing but the same like CSC for a material, for a specific material. It's just a different product. In our case, it's a product like concrete. In terms of green building labels, it's a product like a building or infrastructure. And so from very, very early on, we have been very firm in there must be a link between a holistic label like CSC for concrete and a holistic label like, be it LEED or BREEAM or the German DGNB for buildings. And so once we had the first label out, we took the manual and we went to London, Watford, we went to Stuttgart, Germany, and we talked to the green building labels and what we were telling them is, you are also a holistic system. And we have seen you have a material criterion in your system, but we don't like it because we read it and there were timber criteria. So basically we said, that's fine. Having a say on sustainably sourced timber is good, but you're neglecting or you're leaving out a lot of your opportunities at the table. And that was then where we told them, if you want to picture real construction, you got to look into the core construction products, and concrete is definitely one of those. And then if this is so, if this is true, then here's a label which is objectively built with a lot of stakeholders behind, independently designed, which describes the materiality of making concrete, and that is exactly what you need. And that is a journey. So we started with BREEAM at level 5, and that was a big success that we celebrated. And later on, in the meantime, we are at BREEAM level 7 with our platinum certificate. Same for the German label, where we started at the first entry level, and now we're talking about next levels, how we can better link higher achievements at the CSC level with higher ratings in those green building levels. It's a very interesting and a very relevant journey, which is also very relevant or very important for the success of such material stewardship systems.
Well, I was going to say, as you're talking, I'm just thinking there's a whole range of products and clients that we deal with, whether that's in types of glass, types of ceramic, whatever it may be,
exactly. Where
we need similar things. Michael, I'll come back to you to sort of pick up the thread of specifically CO2, because obviously that's Decarb Connect is more focused on the CO2 strand. But let me just come back to you, Christian, and ask, you sort of said it actually in your introduction, and as you were both talking about these kind of how this has escalated and matured and progressed, that there's a lot of stakeholder involvement. It isn't just about, the concrete and cement sector waving a flag. But who are the stakeholders that you think, that you're hearing that this mattered the most to? Like when you think back to the beginning of this, who is knocking on your door asking, and has that shifted? Has the kind of people on the receiving end of this who are looking for it, has that changed at all?
Well, we had right from the beginning into our stakeholder dialogue, IUCN, so the International Union of Conservation of Nature. We also had on board WWF, BirdLife.
We also had a lot of involvement from academia, from various universities. We had Friends for Nature at some stage. It's not so important who specifically it is. It's just important that you have a certain critical set of critical allies, so that you get unfiltered feedback on certain ways or say certain developments that you're pursuing, and it was harsh in the beginning, and it were not necessarily pleasant conversations that we had, but they were very important.
The dialogue, you see, it helps us making really the system better. So we are sure that we don't stay within our own mindset, but that we integrate, that we take up the views of the stakeholders around us, be it NGOs, civil society organizations, be it academics. We also had labor union representatives on board regarding social aspects. So it is really a broad view on our sector that we have integrated into the CSC certification.
And the green building labels, by the way, are also. So the BRE, for instance, they have a very sophisticated way of assessing material stewardship systems, and that's nothing else but a feedback that is being provided on you. And if we fail, for instance, to explain something to the German Sustainability Council, then we have to think, why don't they get it? Why don't they understand it? Maybe it's something that we have missed. And so they are also a very good provider of feedback.
And on the buyer side, do you hear much from them, or are they just happy to have something that, you know, is a good comparison factor when they're looking between sources or whatever it is they want to buy?
That is in the development phase, I think. It is really important that the CSC certification gets acknowledged by procurement systems. I'm thinking here, for example, of FMC, the United Nations IDDI. It is really important for us that CSC get a recognition here, especially as we can really contribute to the decarbonization of the sector.
And I would like to add that the CSC is made for the buyer side. So it's made for someone who has not an in-depth understanding of the materiality of producing such products. And so getting feedback from them is rather the overall framework. So we are very keen to know something about CO2 or recycling or social matters. So the overall direction, that is something that we need to take into account. But then such kind of interest groups like IUCN or like green building labels who have a deeper understanding of how to operationalize sustainable metrics, they are more in the position to provide a tangible feedback to the system as such.
Okay. Well, I know, we'll definitely be touching on the buyer side a little more before the end of the conversation. But as you both know, obviously this is the Decarb Connect podcast, so our focus is on CO2. So one of the things that I am historically and repeatedly guilty of is conflating sustainability with decarbonisation, because decarbonisation is just what I tend to focus on. Clearly, it's much broader than that. The CSC has a broad sustainability focus. So I'm kind of interested, where does CO2 fit into that? And maybe how, you know, how, in the sense that when you're looking at things like human rights and decarbonisation and other factors, how does this fit in? How does that work for you, Michael?
Yeah, welcome to our world, I would say. And it's again a journey. So you're absolutely right. The CSC is a holistic system. So it touch bases on certain aspects of decarbonization, be it does a company have a policy? Does a company report? Does a company have a reporting which is also then audited by independently verified? Does a company produce, for instance, environmental product declarations or help customers to decarbonize their products? And by journey, I mean, in the meantime, also we have for cement production, for instance, quantifiable metrics. So really performance criteria that you need to fulfill to reach certain levels of certification. And still, it's a holistic system. And still, in the explanation of the CSC, we are very often in the situation, oh, this is a sustainable concrete system. So this is about low CO2 concrete, correct? And we had to answer, no, it's a holistic system. And out of this, we developed the CO2 module. So out of this, we said, okay, holistic system, that's great. And that's the idea. And we are insisting that this is the idea. But apparently, then there is a need to be more specific into the CO2 and decarbonization topic. And so we developed a system called the CO2 module. It's a module put on top of a CSC certification. And with that, you can do quantifiable metrics. What is a low carbon concrete in certain grades of low carbon from 1 star to 4 stars, and hopefully more to come. And that is then our way to really provide the benchmarking.
So does that already reflect the stages that producers will go through in order to get to net zero, or will it need to be adjusted as people get to 2030, 2040?
It's a moving target. So it's now made. It's the first shot, first draft that we are out since 2 years. Very successful draft, by the way, from the uptake. But it will be a moving target.
Okay, let me come back to you, Christian, kind of touching back again on buyers of concrete, but it still goes hand in hand with what we were just saying on your CO2 module. So this is, as we've already established, a certification, a labeling system, and we can see, like you mentioned, the UN's Industrial Decarbonisation Organization, UNIDO, as part, has been on the podcast before talking about their work in trying to drive, particularly at government level, public procurement of green cement, green steel. How does a buyer, either whether it's a government or a private entity, how are they using certification in the procurement process? Are they yet, or is it still kind of in discussions? So I guess that's part one. Then part two is, to what extent is this module yet kind of driving that take up of lower carbon concrete?
Well, the IDDI public procurement system for cement and concrete is still under development. It's a joint development under the leadership, obviously, of IDDI and supported by the Global Cement and Concrete Association, GCCA. It will classify concrete in different emission bands, A to E, low carbon concrete, and there will also be a near zero concrete class, yet details to be defined. Now, how does this connect with the CO2 module? The CO2 module, like IDDI, it benchmarks against state-of-the-art concrete production, and then we have different emission reduction classes. You have to reduce by at least 30% versus state-of-the-art in order to be eligible to carry, to label your products with a CO2 module. And we have a local benchmark in IDDI. This is still under development, how we do this. And once this the work has been finalized, we will obviously see how we can correlate the CSC's CO2 module with the IDDI system in order to be sure that the CSC certified concrete will be directly going into this public procurement system.
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think, well, a lot of what you're doing is hard, but it's hard because labeling, certification in any of the industries where we're looking at it, it is so fundamental. I'm sure it was Rana Gonheim from UNIDO when she was on, who was talking about this need that when you look at the amount of development around the world, is it, materials enough to rebuild New York City every week or something? There's some kind of crazy statistic about the sheer volume that's going to be needed. And of course, coming back to concrete, that's the issue, isn't it? It's more the volume of concrete used that creates the CO2 problem more than anything.
Yeah, it's only the volume. In the end, concrete as such is a low carbon emitting product, but it is directly after water the most used material by human being. That makes, even though that the emissions per cubic meter of concrete are very low, the sheer amount of concrete that society uses is responsible for the overall CO2 emissions. And with CSC certification, with the CO2 module, we aim at contributing to the overall reduction. And since transparency and credibility are very important for us, it is important to mention also that the label is that all the certification process are third-party verified. So each plant that undergoes certification, they are audited. Is not like many other labels or like some other labels, just kind of a self-declaration. No, you really undergo a robust process which has to be repeated every 3 years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if one day we can get, I mean, I know at the moment this is focused on the, industrial scale buyers of industrial products, but, imagine buying a house one day that has that CSC stamp on it or something like that. That feels like, I know that's a way off, but a kind of an interesting proposition for those that want to be at the consumer end of things, engaged in this, lowering of carbon across their living and their own footprint.
Absolutely, sure. For the moment, the aspect of sustainability, there is a strong focus on larger construction projects.
Isn't a bit like in green buildings? So we don't see every building having a green building label, and yet they play an important role in some real estate markets. And similarly, the CSC has to start somewhere. And so as long as we have a critical mass, which then stands for good and best practice, I think that's already a success.
No, it's a phenomenal success. And it's just something that gets, as you say, it's something that starts that momentum moving. Well, Michael, actually, since you commented on that, I mean, one of the things that we talked about when we got together before the recording was that it's important to you, to everybody involved in the CSC, that it's not a static thing. As you've already said, these are moving targets. These are certifications that are progressing and being added to. So in both the kind of CO2 module and your broader sustainability work, what does that mean? How is continuous improvement applied?
Maybe just one example. So there are some performance criteria on CO2, and those are evolving by time. So the CO2 per ton of cementitious benchmark, that will change in the next version. And be rest assured that what stands for one star low carbon concrete will be a different figure in a couple of years' time. So targets or benchmarks as such will be developing. And also at some point of time, we will talk about a net zero target. We are not there yet, but that is also then the ultimate objective, of course. And the second is that we are adding more and more quantitative metrics, not only on CO2, also on other air emissions, on land use, whatever you can benchmark, and wherever we feel then comfortable to come up and develop with the benchmark. And so that's the other moving target. And the third leg would then be learnings out of past certifications, feedback out from green building labels. Green building labels are also evolving, and the CSC is going hand in hand with those developments. So we are getting smarter every day in the way we define sustainable concrete, and we adapt the system accordingly.
This next question, I promise, is not about CO2, because I know this is about broader sustainability.
No worries.
So I'll come back to you, Christian, on human rights and biodiversity. It was interesting at the week that you and I first spoke, and you were both talking about this as a key aspect, or key aspects plural, of your work. I then subsequently had 2 other calls with people in other sectors, but who are, to my mind, decarbonisation people, but who are now finding these very important themes coming into their work as well. So what, they're rising up the agenda, obviously. How do you respond to that? I sort of feel like I instinctively understand maybe how you might respond on biodiversity more perhaps than how you respond on human rights. But I wonder, what do you make of that, and how are you at the CSC responding?
Yeah, the CSC is always eager to integrate latest sustainability developments in new CSC certification versions. And as far as human rights is concerned, we think really this is at the core of sustainability. So in that sense, it is a prerequisite in CSC certification, which you have to comply with in order, if you want to get access to our certification. And what does it mean? Now, it means that in the perimeter of your responsibility, that there is, for example, no discrimination against vulnerable groups. And in the context of mining operations, that you would take care of indigenous people's rights. So there is a list really within human rights of criteria that you must fulfill and that there's no debate. Now, biodiversity, as you say, this is more hands-on. So a recent trend is that we are looking into avoiding any net loss when we start operations. Yeah, so that we have baseline reporting, that we have a clear plan what we will do in order to avoid any losses in biodiversity.
Okay, that makes sense. And yes, in case anyone misunderstood, I definitely was not saying why is human rights part of this, just to be clear. I was just wondering how you measure that. But as you say, it's ensuring that it is taken seriously as part of the evaluation of suppliers and supply chain and value chain, isn't it?
Yes.
So coming back into CO2, are either of you seeing a push for low carbon coming from the building sector? I mean, Michael, was it Arcadis that you were?
No, you mentioned it, yes.
Are they actively pushing on that, or is it sort of an active interest around low carbon concrete? How would you quantify it at the moment?
It's a tricky question. It really depends on who you're asking. And yes, I do see a push from certain real estate developers, from certain markets with also certain sustainability strategies exactly for low carbon and exactly for low carbon in the material field or in the field of materials. And the reason for that is that they all know how to do low carbon buildings in terms of energy consumption. So they know their usual suspects of renewable energies, of energy saving measures and whatnot, but they have a very limited understanding of materials and the impact of materials on the carbon footprint of a building. And they are starting to realize that. And they're starting to look into this and getting figures, making life cycle assessments of buildings. And once you're doing this, you need to get your figures. And once you're doing this, you need to understand what is a low carbon material, not only for concrete, but also for others. And so we are getting there. EU taxonomy in Europe helps a lot because they are also looking into the same topic. Certain regional legislations, be it in France, be it in Denmark, now also starting in some aspects in Germany, are also helping raising awareness for low carbon on the what we call gray emission, field of gray emissions. And so, yes, it's coming. Is it mainstream? Not yet, but it's also something which more and more are really concerned about and looking into.
Okay, let me. I'm sort of coming towards the end of our conversation now. So let me ask you both the same question, and I've got a kind of a bit of a follow-up question for Christian, which is, what is it? So we talked about United Nations work streams around industrial decarbonisation. I'm sure we've all read news stories about various states or areas in US and elsewhere that are setting up low carbon procurement programs. So we are starting to see the early foothills, if you like, of greener public procurement. But if you were each going to do or push for one thing that would drive more procurement right now of lower carbon concrete, what would you go for? What do you think is the trigger that would kind of really start to unleash that in the short term? And Christian, I'll come to you first on that.
It needs to come with incentives. So low carbon procurement initiatives, they need to come with incentives really to get it done.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I would like to add the transparency. So you need the transparency about performance levels of buildings. It's starting at the building level. And you have to separate this into operational and embodied impacts, especially on the carbon side. Just to be clear, there are more environmental impacts than CO2 or CO2 equivalent, but it is a very important one. And you have to get values. You have to create an understanding what's a good performance per square meter building and what's a lousy performance. And starting from there, then you can look into why am I getting this performance? And then you're at the transparency level of building materials, construction materials. And that's the other thing. Beyond incentives, or in addition to incentives, you need to have a robust foundation on how you measure what's worthwhile being incentivized.
Okay, well, Christian, last kind of question I'm going to bring to you. So it really does follow on actually from that question of how we drive more procurement. But as we look out over the next 10, 20, 30 years, clearly the biggest markets for concrete are in developing world, whether that's from major infrastructure like airports and roads to just the kind of sheer scale of some of the cities and urban areas that are being developed. So how can a group like the CSC affect change in those markets, do you think?
Yeah, it can a lot. CSC increases transparency, so it reduces undeclared work, obviously. That's one important aspect. This supports then compliance with law, and that social and environmental aspects of work continue to improve. I'm thinking here, for example, of labor conditions, yeah, including fair wages, but also safety at work, and even very simple things like access to drinking water at work. Yeah, very, very basic things. And on the environmental side, CSC certifications with all the criteria around biodiversity, land use, pollution, as we were saying, it helps that our sector's unwanted environmental impact on nature is minimized, and also, and in particular, in emerging countries.
Okay, well, I mean, thank you, both of you, both Christian and Michael, for kind of exploring that with me. As we've said throughout, I think this whole area of labeling across the kind of various industries that Decarb Connect comes into contact with is really, I mean, other than in steel, I think it's like cement and steel seem to be really charging ahead, but we are seeing so much coming through in the other sectors. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that influences buyers and then right down to the little consumer, even like me. So thanks for talking us through that and for representing the work that you're doing across the sustainability sphere. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
At Jano Media, we recognise that great content has the power to create impactful and positive change for lives and society. Whether that's video, live streams, photography or podcasts, partnering with us will enable you to harness the power of content to engage, inform, and inspire. Reach out to us today.